My husband was yelling at me, gaslighting me like always. "No one would believe you anyway," he shouted. I stayed calm, reached into my pocket, and pulled out a small device. I pressed play. His face went completely white. "Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin." No one would believe you anyway. Robert's voice was a controlled shout, the kind that didn't carry past the walls of our living room, but vibrated in my bones. He stood by the fireplace, his back to the perfectly arranged mantel, his face a mask of exasperated reason. We had been discussing, or rather he had been dictating, why we would not be attending my niece's graduation party. A prior client dinner was suddenly, crucially, more important. My quiet suggestion that I could go alone had been the spark. "You're being too sensitive, Eve," he had said, his tone shifting to that familiar, weary patience. "You're twisting this into something it's not. That dinner is a career milestone for me. Don't you support my career?" Then, when I had remained silent just looking at him, the mask had slipped further. "You're doing that thing again. That silent judgment. It's manipulative." And finally, the crescendo, delivered with a cold, final certainty. "No one would believe you anyway." The room was very still. The evening light slanted across the cream-colored rug, highlighting the dust motes his outburst had disturbed. I could feel the precise texture of the sofa fabric under my fingertips, the cool, smooth edge of the throw pillow I had straightened minutes before he came home. For years, sentences like that had been a door slamming shut. They were the end of the conversation, the end of the argument, the end of my point of view. They lived in my head afterwards, making me doubt my own memory, my own feelings. But not this time. I let the silence stretch. I watched his eyes, the slight smirk of satisfaction that always appeared after he delivered what he considered a winning, unanswerable point. He thought he had won. He thought I would shrink, apologize for my sensitivity, and go upstairs to quietly resent him. I did not move from the sofa. My breathing was even. I felt a strange, crystalline calm. "My memory has been poor lately," I said, my voice flat. "You're right about that." He nodded, a quick dismissive jerk of his chin. "See? It's not a big deal. We'll send a nice gift." I continued. So I started writing things down to keep track. But my notes, they felt inadequate, subjective. A faint line appeared between his brows. This was not the script. "Then I realized," I said, slowly reaching into the pocket of my cardigan, "the problem with memory or notes is that they can be disputed. They can be called a misunderstanding or sensitivity." My fingers closed around the small rectangular device. It was cool and solid. I drew it out and placed it on the coffee table between us with a soft, deliberate click. It was a digital voice recorder, a simple black model. I had bought it 3 months prior from an electronics store across town, paying in cash. Robert's eyes dropped to it. His expression did not change at first. It was a blank screen processing an unrecognizable input. Then, a slow, incredulous frown. "What is that?" "I started recording conversations," I said, to clarify my memory. His face went through a series of minute adjustments, confusion, dawning comprehension, then a flush of anger. "You recorded me, without my consent. That's insane, Eve. That's a violation." "It is a reference," I corrected, my tone still devoid of emotion, "for my own clarity." He took a step forward, his hand outstretched as if to snatch the device. I did not flinch. I pressed the play button. His own voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. "You're doing that thing again. That silent judgment. It's manipulative." A pause on the recording, the faint sound of my breathing. Then clear and sharp. "No one would believe you anyway." I stopped the playback. The color drained from his face. It was not a figure of speech. I saw the blood retreat, leaving his skin a waxy pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The smirk was gone, replaced by a slack emptiness. He looked from the recorder to my face, searching for the tears, the hysteria, the reaction he knew how to manage. He found only stillness. That's out of context, he stammered. The confidence was gone, his voice higher. You provoked that. You edited it. I have the full file, I said. 3 months of files. They are time-stamped. They are stored in several places. This was a lie at that moment. I had only backed up to one cloud service, but the effect was immediate. His breathing became audible, a shallow rasp. The professional composure, the charming facade he wore for the world, cracked like cheap plaster. I saw raw panic in his eyes. It was a deeper fear than anger, the fear of exposure. His reputation, the carefully constructed image of the rational, successful, supportive husband, was suddenly contingent on my silence. And my silence was no longer guaranteed. "You can't," he began, then stopped. He seemed to physically shrink, his shoulders hunching. "Eve, why would you do this? This is so hostile. We're married. We have problems. We talk about them. You don't record them like a spy." "We do talk," I agreed. "You talk, I listen, and then you tell me what I heard, what I felt, and what I remembered are all incorrect. This," I gestured to the recorder, "is just a second opinion." The word gaslighting hung in the air between us, unspoken by me, but he flinched as if I had shouted it. He had always avoided that word, dismissing it as pop psychology. He tried a new tactic. His posture softened. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of supposed vulnerability. "Look, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I was frustrated. You know how work is. I love you. This device, it's not us. Let's just destroy it and talk. Really talk." He took another step toward the coffee table. His eyes were fixed on the recorder. I picked it up first. I held it in my palm, then slipped it back into my pocket. The movement was final. "I think I will go to my niece's graduation," I said, standing up. "I'll be back tomorrow evening." "You're leaving?" The panic spiked again. "Now, where will you go?" "To a hotel. I had researched several weeks ago. I knew which one, the rate, the check-in time." "This is an overreaction," he pleaded, the anger trying to resurface but choked by fear. "You're blowing this out of proportion. People have arguments." I walked past him towards the hallway. I did not look back. "Yes," I said, "they do, and sometimes people record them." I climbed the stairs. My heart was beating a steady, strong rhythm in my chest, not from fear, but from a clean, sharp focus. In our bedroom, I opened the closet and took out the small, wheeled suitcase I had packed incrementally over the past month. A few essential clothes, my important documents which I had quietly gathered from the safe, my laptop and charger. The suitcase had lived there, behind my longer coats, a silent promise to myself. I could hear him pacing downstairs, the heavy, agitated tread on the hardwood floor. He did not come up. He was likely trying to formulate a new strategy, to find the angle that would regain control. But for the first time in over a decade, I was operating on a different plane. His words, his reactions were now data points. His panic was a confirmation of my hypothesis. I rolled the suitcase to the top of the stairs. He appeared at the bottom, looking up. He had put on his reasonable face again, but it was strained, the edges shaky. "Eve, please, don't do this. Let's sit down. We can fix this." I did not answer. I guided the suitcase down each step, the soft thump a measured counterpoint to his silence. When I reached the foyer, I put on my coat. I checked my wallet for the credit card in my name only. I had maintained a separate account for my floral design earnings, a fact he had dismissed as frivolous, but I had guarded. He stood in the archway to the living room, the scene of the crime. He looked lost in his own home. "What are you going to do with those recordings?" he asked. It was the real question. I met his gaze. The calm I felt was immense and solid. "I don't know yet," I said, and that was the truth. For now, possessing the truth was enough. The weight of the recorder in my pocket was not a burden. It was a key. I opened the front door. The cool evening air washed over me. I did not look back as I wheeled my suitcase down the walkway to the car. I started the engine and drove away, watching our house, that beautiful, silent prison, shrink in the rearview mirror until it disappeared. The hotel room was a neutral space. Beige walls, a generic landscape painting, a desk with a sturdy chair. I placed my suitcase by the bed but did not unpack it. The first action was to connect my laptop to the hotel's Wi-Fi. I paid for the premium high-speed access. This was not a time for frugality. The digital voice recorder felt heavy in my hand. I connected it to the laptop via USB. A folder populated on the screen, filled with audio files named by date and time. I had created this system from the beginning. I opened the master spreadsheet I kept, the one disguised as a gardening log. Each file name corresponded to an entry. Pruned roses meant a minor disagreement. Treated for black spot marked a significant incident, like the one tonight. I began the upload process. The files went to a cloud storage service I had opened under an old separate email address Robert knew nothing about. The password was a 16-character string of letters, numbers, and symbols I had memorized. I watched the progress bar fill. Once that was complete, I logged out. Next, I used a different browser to access a second cloud service. I created a new account using a variation of my maiden name and a new email provider. I uploaded the files again. This process took over an hour. The room was silent except for the hum of the laptop fan and the occasional sound of a car passing on the street below. I did not turn on the television. The silence was a relief. As the files uploaded, I reviewed my spreadsheet. The first entry was dated 94 days ago. The incident had been small. We were discussing plans for the upcoming weekend. He had said, we agreed we'd visit my mother. I had no memory of such an agreement. When I said so, his response was calm, definitive. Eve, we talked about it on Tuesday. You said it was fine. You're forgetting things again. I had doubted myself. I had apologized. That night, I lay awake, my mind circling the conversation, the certainty in his voice against the blank space in my memory. A headache built behind my eyes. The next day, I drove to an electronics store in another town. I paid cash for the recorder. My initial justification was clinical. I needed an objective record to correct my faulty memory, to see if I was, as he often implied, becoming unreliable. The first time I pressed record, my hand shook. It felt like a betrayal. I hid the device in the pocket of my house robe during a conversation about finances. Listening back later, I heard my own voice, tentative and placating. I heard his, a steady stream of directives framed as suggestions. The discrepancy was clear. My memory had been accurate. He had stated a fact about an investment I knew I had not approved. On the recording, he stated it again. I had not forgotten. He had invented. That was the moment the quiet fracture in my reality began to heal around a new, hard truth. The recorder was not a tool for correcting my memory. It was a tool for documenting his fiction. The second upload finished. I now had 2 copies secured in separate digital locations. I then copied the files onto 2 small encrypted USB drives. One went into the inner zippered compartment of my purse. The other I would mail to myself at a post office box I had rented a month ago, a task for tomorrow morning. With the evidence secured, I allowed myself to think of the next steps. The hotel was a temporary solution. I had enough money in my personal account for a week, perhaps 2 if I was careful. I needed legal advice. I opened a new document and began a list. 1. Research family law attorneys, specializing in high-conflict divorces. 2. Compile a summary of assets using the documents I brought. 3. Outline a timeline of key events, referenced by audio file names. 4. Find a more permanent place to stay. My phone buzzed on the desk. Robert's name appeared on the screen. I watched it ring. The voicemail notification appeared a minute later. I did not listen to it immediately. I finished my list, saved it to the cloud and a USB drive, and then prepared for bed. In the bathroom, under the fluorescent light, I looked at my face. The woman staring back had calm eyes. The tension I usually carried in my jaw was absent. I brushed my teeth with the travel kit from my suitcase. The routine was familiar, but the context was not. I felt no urge to cry. I felt a focused clarity. I returned to the phone. I played the voicemail on speaker, placing the device on the desk as I folded my clothes. Eve, it's me. Look, I think we both said things we regret tonight. What you did, it was a shock, but I want to understand. Can we please talk? Just talk. No devices. Come home. We can work this out. Call me, please. His voice was softened, concerned. The reasonable man. The man who wanted to understand. I had heard this version before, always after a particularly harsh outburst. It was the reset button. It invited me to share my hurt so he could explain it away, minimizing it until the problem was once again my reaction, not his action. The cycle would restart. I did not save the message. I deleted it. Then I powered off the phone. The silence in the room became absolute. I slept for 6 hours, a deep, uninterrupted sleep I had not experienced in years. I woke at dawn. My first conscious thought was not a rehearsal of potential conflicts or a smoothing over of imagined tensions. It was a simple recall of the tasks on my list. I dressed and went down to the business center off the hotel lobby. I used their computer to print the documents I would mail to myself. At a shipping store that opened early, I purchased a padded envelope, addressed it to my post office box, and dropped it in a blue collection bin. The click of the metal flap was a satisfying sound. Back in my room, I turned my phone on. Several text messages appeared, each progressively more strained. Please just let me know you're safe. Eve, this is childish. We need to communicate. I'm getting worried now. If I don't hear from you by noon, I'm calling the police for a wellness check. I typed a reply. I am safe. Do not contact me today. I will be in touch. I sent it, then blocked his number. The threat of a wellness check was a tactic. He would not call the police. The possibility of involving an external authority, of having to explain the situation to a third party, would deter him. His world depended on controlled, private narratives. The next item on my list was the most critical. I began searching for attorneys. I looked for firms with a reputation for strategic, discreet handling of contentious divorces. I read client reviews, focusing on keywords like evidence, high asset, and protective. I made a short list of 3 names. I then wrote a draft email. It was brief and factual. Dear attorney name, I am seeking a consultation regarding a divorce involving coercive control and financial manipulation. I have been systematically recording interactions for several months and have compiled corroborating documentation. I would like to discuss retaining your services. Please advise on your availability and consultation process. Sincerely, Evelyn Carter. I sent the email to the first attorney on my list. I did not wait for a response before moving to the next task. Action was a buffer against doubt. Each completed item on my list was a brick in a new foundation. The old one, built on his words and my eroded confidence, was gone. I was building something different now, alone in a beige room, with a spreadsheet and a collection of audio files as my blueprints. The following morning, the silence of the hotel room became oppressive. The walls were too close. I had received 2 automated email responses from law offices acknowledging my inquiry, and one from a human assistant scheduling a consultation for the day after tomorrow. The process was in motion, but the hours between now and then stretched, empty and heavy. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't here and wasn't home. I drove to the Sunrise Cafe. It was a place I had visited occasionally over the years, always alone, under the pretext of needing a quiet hour to sketch floral arrangements. The truth was, it was one of the few spaces I occupied that Robert had no interest in. He considered it quaint. which from him was a dismissal. That made it safe. The bell above the door chimed. The air was warm and carried the scent of coffee and baked bread. I took a seat at a small table by the window, my back to the wall, a habit from a lifetime of observing. I ordered tea and a scone, but when the food arrived, I found I could only stare at it. My hands, resting on the table, had a slight, persistent tremor. I clasped them together to steady them. "That's a thinking man's stare," a voice said, gentle and unassuming. I looked up. A black woman, likely in her late 60s, stood by the adjacent table, holding a tray with an empty cup and a book. She had a calm, observant face, and silver hair swept into a neat twist. She wore a simple, elegant sweater. I recognized her. She was a fixture here, often reading in the same corner armchair for hours. "I'm sorry?" I said, my voice tighter than I intended. She nodded toward my untouched plate. "You've been looking at that scone like it posed you a difficult riddle. I was debating whether to recommend the lemon poppy seed instead. It's less confrontational." A faint, unexpected sound escaped me. Almost a laugh, but thinner, frayed. "It's not the scone." "No," she said, her eyes kind but not prying. "It rarely is. May I?" She gestured to the empty chair at my table. I hesitated. My instinct was to refuse, to protect the fragile shell of solitude I had built. But the isolation in the hotel had been a different kind of weight. I gave a short nod. She placed her tray down and sat. "I'm Miriam," she said. "I've seen you here before. You're the one with the sketchbook. The flowers are lovely." "Evelyn," I said. "Thank you." A pause stretched. I did not know how to do this, to make small talk that wasn't a performance. "You're here often." "My daily ritual," she said. "After my husband passed, the house got too quiet in the mornings. Harold never liked silence. He filled it with terrible whistling and newspaper rustling. I come here to remember what a quiet crowd sounds like." She spoke of loss with a straightforward warmth that held no demand for sympathy. It was simply a fact of her life. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said, the automatic response. "Thank you. It was 5 years ago. The missing changes, but it doesn't stop." She sipped her water. "You seem like you're carrying a quiet of your own today, a heavier kind." The directness was disarming. It bypassed the social script. I looked down at my hands still clasped. The tremor was less now. "I left my husband last night," I said. The words, spoken aloud to a stranger, felt both dangerous and solid. Miriam did not gasp or offer pity. She simply nodded, a slow, accepting motion. "That is a significant thing to do. It's complicated. He says one thing and means another. He says I remember things wrong." I was venturing onto thin ice, testing its strength. "Ah," she said, a single syllable that held a world of understanding. "The gaslight." It's an old play, but an effective one if you're not looking at the lamp. The term, spoken so casually, so accurately, loosened something in my chest. You know the term. I was a librarian for 42 years. You see all sorts of stories, in books and in people who come to hide in the stacks. She studied me for a moment. "Did you remember wrong?" I met her gaze. "No." I started documenting it, to be sure. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. A small, approving smile touched her lips. "Good for you." 3 words. They were not dramatic. They carried no grand pronouncement, but they were an external validation, an echo of my own resolve that came from outside my own head. It was a tiny foothold on a sheer cliff face. "It feels cold," I admitted. "The documenting." "Truth often is," Miriam said, "before it can become warm again. It's a scalpel, not a blanket. It cuts away the sickness so health can grow." She paused. "Do you have somewhere to go? Somewhere safe?" "A hotel for now. I've contacted a lawyer." "Practical. Good." She reached into her bag, a large woven tapestry thing, and pulled out a small notebook and a pen. She wrote something down, tore out the page, and slid it across the table to me. It was a phone number. That's my cell. I don't give it to many cafe acquaintances, but if you need a sounding board or a place to sit that isn't a hotel room, you call. My house is just a few blocks from here. It has a very comfortable silence. I stared at the number. The gesture was monumental in its simplicity. No pressure, no demand for my story, just an offered lifeline. I don't want to impose. You imposing would be showing up unannounced and criticizing my garden. Taking an offered phone number is just good sense. She stood up, gathering her tray. The lemon poppy seed is truly excellent on Thursdays. Think about it. She walked away, returning her tray to the counter and settling back into her armchair with her book. She did not look at me again. The interaction was complete, with no loose ends of expectation dangling. I looked at the slip of paper. I folded it carefully and placed it in my wallet behind my ID. Then I picked up my fork and took a bite of the scone. It was dry, but I ate it. I drank my tea while it was still warm. Outside the window, people walked by, living their ordinary lives. I was no longer just observing them from inside a glass box. I was among them, at a small table, with a phone number in my wallet and a plan forming. I finished my tea and paid the bill. As I passed Miriam's chair on the way out, I paused. She glanced up from her book. "Thank you, Miriam," I said. She smiled, a real one that reached her eyes. "You're welcome, Evelyn. Go well." I left the cafe. The sun felt different on my skin, not warmer but clearer. The tremor in my hands was gone. I drove back to the hotel, but the beige walls seemed less constricting now. I had accomplished two things. I had left the isolation of the room, and I had spoken a fragment of my truth to another person. That person had not doubted me. She had said, "Good for you." It was a small stone laid beside the bricks of evidence and legal plans, but it was solid. It belonged to me. The law office of Shaw and Associates was located in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel. I arrived 20 minutes early. I sat in the lobby on a firm leather chair, my portfolio case on my lap. Inside were printed transcripts I had made of key audio files, a timeline of events, and photocopies of financial documents. I had also brought the recorder and a set of headphones. I wore a simple navy dress, professional but unremarkable. This was not a social call. At exactly 10 o'clock, a woman in her 50s with a sharp bob of silver gray hair emerged from a hallway. She wore a tailored suit and had an air of focused efficiency. "Evelyn Carter, I'm Diane Shaw. Please, come back to my office." Her office was orderly. A large desk held a computer, a neat stack of files, and a single framed photograph of two teenagers. The shelves were filled with legal texts. The window offered a view of the city, not the suburbs. It felt like a place where outcomes were negotiated, not emotions. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice," I said, taking the chair she indicated. "Of course. Your email was compelling." Diane Shaw sat behind her desk, lacing her fingers together. "You mentioned recordings and documentation of coercive control. That's a specific term. Can you tell me, in your own words, what led you to make those recordings?" This was the first test. I gave a concise summary, sticking to behavioral patterns, not feelings. My husband, Robert, has a pattern of contradicting my memory of events, of denying things he has said or done, and of isolating me from family commitments under the guise of logistical necessity. I began recording conversations 94 days ago to verify my own recollections. The recordings confirm a systematic pattern of manipulation. She nodded, her expression neutral. "And the impetus for leaving?" 3 nights ago, during a disagreement, he stated, "No one would believe you anyway." I revealed I had been recording. I left that evening. A flicker of something, interest, perhaps approval, crossed her face. "You have the recording of that exchange?" "I do. May I hear it? And perhaps one earlier example for context?" I opened my portfolio. I handed her the printed transcript of the "no one would believe you" exchange, then set up the recorder. I provided the headphones. The first file is from approximately 2 months ago. It's a discussion about a joint investment. My voice is the quieter one. She put on the headphones. I watched her face as she listened. Her eyes remained on the transcript. Then she glanced out the window, processing. She listened for about 3 minutes, then stopped the device. Without comment, she played the second file, the one from the living room. I saw her jaw tighten slightly at Robert's line. She removed the headphones. "The audio quality is clear," she said. "Your documentation is meticulous. The transcripts are helpful." She placed the headphones on the desk. "How many hours of recording do you have?" "Approximately 47 hours, across 94 files. I have them backed up in multiple secure locations." "And he is aware of the scope?" "He knows I have recordings. He does not know the extent." Diane Shaw leaned back in her chair. "This is exceptionally useful, Evelyn. In my practice, I often have clients who describe gaslighting, but evidence is typically anecdotal. This is empirical. It changes the landscape completely." Hearing a professional confirm the value of my evidence was a different validation than Miriam's. This was tactical, strategic. It had legal weight. "What are my options?" I asked. "We proceed with a divorce filing. Given the evidence of coercive control, we can petition for a disproportionate share of marital assets. The recordings demonstrate a course of conduct designed to undermine your autonomy. In this state, that is a relevant factor in equitable distribution." She spoke clearly, without jargon. "We can also seek a temporary restraining order based on psychological abuse, though that is harder to obtain without threats of physical violence. His reaction to being served will be telling. He will be angry. He will try to contact me, to explain it away." "Do you have a safe residence?" "I am in a hotel. I am looking for an apartment." "Good. I advise you to secure one quickly. Change your phone number. Only communicate with him through me or my office from this point forward. Do you have independent funds?" "I have a separate account from my floral design business. It has enough for a deposit and several months' rent." "Excellent. That gives you breathing room." She made a note. "The next step is for me to draft the petition. I will list coercive control and emotional abuse as grounds. We will request exclusive use of the marital home, but given the circumstances, I assume you do not wish to return." "I do not." "We will then request he pay temporary spousal support and contribute to your legal fees. With this evidence," she gestured to the recorder, "his attorney will likely advise him to settle quickly and favorably. His reputation is a significant asset to him. Public exposure of these recordings would damage it irreparably. That is our leverage." It was the first time someone had articulated the endgame so plainly. It wasn't about drama or confrontation. It was about leverage, settlement, and a permanent separation. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "A retainer agreement, a list of all marital assets and debts to the best of your knowledge, the address of your new residence once secured, and your instructions." She met my eyes. "My goal is to achieve a clean, financially secure exit for you as efficiently as possible, to minimize your continued exposure to him. Do you agree with that objective?" "Yes," I said. The word felt definitive. "Then we have a plan." She slid a folder across the desk. "This is the retainer agreement. Please review it. You can sign it here or take it with you. Once signed, I will begin drafting immediately." I opened the folder. The language was dense but clear. The retainer fee was a significant number, but it represented an investment in my future. I had the funds. I took a pen from my portfolio. "I'll sign now," I said. I read each page, initialing where required, and signed at the end. I wrote a check from my business account. The actions were administrative, but each stroke of the pen transferred authority. I was no longer a wife navigating a maze of manipulation. I was a client with representation. I handed the documents back to her. She placed them in a new file with my name on the tab. "I'll be in touch within 48 hours with the draft petition," she said, standing. "In the meantime, secure your housing, maintain your documentation, and do not engage with him." I stood as well, placing the recorder back in my case. "Thank you, Attorney Shaw." "Diane is fine," she said, offering a handshake. Her grip was firm. "You've done the hard part already, Evelyn. Now we make it count." I walked out of the office, the portfolio case lighter somehow despite the added weight of the retainer agreement. The sun was high over the city. The systematic, quiet work of the past 3 months had just been converted into a legal strategy. The path was no longer just in my mind or on my spreadsheet. It was in a file on a professional's desk. The transition was complete. I was now a party to a lawsuit. The thought was not frightening, it was a relief. The rules were different here, and for the first time, I had proof that mattered. The process server did his job at 11:07 a.m. on a Tuesday. Diane's assistant emailed me to confirm. Papers served at his office. Await response. I was in my new apartment assembling a bookshelf from a flat pack kit. The notification chimed on my phone. I put down the Allen wrench, wiped my hands on my jeans, and read the message. I felt a quiet click inside, like a final lock engaging. I had leased the apartment 2 days after meeting with Diane. It was a 1-bedroom in a secure building not far from Miriam's neighborhood. The walls were white and bare, the floors clean. It held no history. That afternoon, I installed a small, discreet Wi-Fi camera on a high bookshelf in the living area. It looked like a generic tech gadget. I tested the feed on my phone. The view was clear. He arrived at 6:45 p.m. I was expecting him. The building's front desk called. "A Mr. Carter is here to see you. He says it's urgent." I told them to send him up. I did not open my door immediately when he knocked. I first opened the camera app on my phone, ensured it was recording, and placed the phone screen down on the kitchen counter. Then I answered the door. Robert stood in the hallway. He was still in his work suit, but his tie was loosened, his hair slightly disheveled. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a combustible mix of fury and disbelief. He held a crumpled manila envelope in one hand. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice a low hiss as he stepped past me into the apartment without invitation. He waved the envelope. "You had me served? At my office? In front of my colleagues?" I closed the door, but did not lock it. I remained standing near the entrance. "Those are divorce papers, Robert. I believe you'll find they are self-explanatory." He stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. The controlled charm was utterly gone, stripped away by the day's public humiliation. "This is insane. This is over a little argument? You're destroying our marriage over a misunderstanding?" "It is not a misunderstanding. It is a pattern. The papers detail it." He threw the envelope onto my new empty coffee table. It skidded across the bare surface. Coercive control? Emotional abuse? These are lies, Evelyn. Vicious lies. Who put these ideas in your head? That lawyer? That's what this is, isn't it? Some ambulance chaser filling your head with nonsense to get a fee. I retained Diane Shaw based on the evidence I collected, the evidence you are aware of. He took a step toward me, his body coiled. The anger was looking for a target. "Those recordings are illegal. They're inadmissible. You recorded me without my consent. My lawyer will have them thrown out." "This is a two-party consent state," I said, my voice level. I checked. "The legal precedent here holds that you did not have a reasonable expectation of privacy in our shared living spaces during marital conversations. The recordings are admissible." Diane confirmed it. The news hit him physically. He blinked, the legal bluster deflating. He had not done his research. He had assumed his anger was enough. His tactics shifted. The anger melted, replaced by a performative hurt. His shoulders slumped. "Eve, please, look at me. This is me, your husband. I love you. I made mistakes. I was stressed. I said terrible things. I admit it." He took another step, his hands open, pleading. "But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll go, I promise. We have 20 years together. You can't just throw that away." It was the love bombing, the promised change, the appeal to history and shared investment. I had imagined this moment for weeks. I felt nothing but a detached recognition of the script. "The petition outlines my terms," I said. "You can respond through your attorney. All communication should go through Diane Shaw's office moving forward." His face crumpled, not into sadness but into frustration at the failure of his performance. The pleading vanished, replaced by a colder, more calculating rage. "You think you've won something. You're in a bare apartment with nothing. I built the life we have, my money, my reputation, my work. You'll be left with nothing but your little recordings and a pile of legal bills. You'll see." "The financial requests are outlined in the temporary orders," I said, "including spousal support and contribution to legal fees." He laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "You're dreaming. I'll fight you for every penny. I'll drag this out for years. You'll be buried in paperwork until you give up. You don't have the stomach for a fight, Evelyn. You never did." I did not respond. I simply turned my head and looked pointedly at the high shelf in the corner of the room. Then I looked back at him. His eyes followed my gaze. He squinted at the small, dark lens of the camera. He hadn't noticed it before. The color drained from his face for the second time in our recent history. The arrogance, the threat, the performative hurt, all of it evaporated, leaving pure, undiluted panic. "Are you recording this?" he whispered. "I am documenting all interactions for my safety and for legal purposes," I stated. It was the phrase Diane had suggested. He stood perfectly still, staring at the camera as if it were a gun. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. The fight drained out of him, replaced by the terror of permanent documentation. Every word he had just said, the threats, the promises, the insults, was now another file, another piece of leverage. He looked from the camera to me. The man who had said, "No one would believe you," was now faced with a machine that believed everything. It was a truth he could not argue with, could not gaslight. He took a step back, then another. He retrieved the crumpled envelope from the table, clutching it like a talisman. He moved toward the door, his movements jerky. "This isn't over," he said, but the words were hollow, devoid of conviction. They were a reflex, not a threat. "Goodbye, Robert," I said. He opened the door and left, closing it softly behind him. I listened to his footsteps fade down the hallway. I walked to the door, locked it, and engaged the deadbolt. Then I picked up my phone from the counter. I stopped the recording. I saved the file, labeled it with the date and time, and initiated a backup to the cloud. I looked around my empty apartment. The unassembled bookshelf lay in pieces on the floor. The camera's tiny green light glowed steadily on the shelf. A profound silence settled in the room, but it was not the silence of walking on eggshells. It was the silence after a storm has passed. It was mine. He had tried every tool in his arsenal: rage, legal threats, love, pity, and intimidation. Each had failed against the simple, unblinking eye of the evidence. The power dynamic was not just shifted, it was inverted. I picked up the Allen wrench and returned to my bookshelf. The work of building something was now entirely my own. The bookshelf stood assembled in the corner, holding a few books and a small potted fern. The apartment was taking shape. I had bought a sofa, a bed, a dining table. The space was functional but felt transient, like a long-stay hotel. The legal process was a slow grind of paperwork and waiting. Diane's office was negotiating with Robert's lawyer, a man named Branson, whose correspondence was aggressively formal. The temporary support order was in place, providing funds. The mechanics of the divorce were proceeding, but my days had too much empty space. Miriam called me one Thursday morning. "The Sunrise Cafe is lovely, but it's a passive activity," she said. "I have a proposition. The community garden on Elm Street needs volunteers on Saturday mornings, weeding mostly. It's hard to ruminate on the past when you're focused on pulling crabgrass. It's also free, and you get to take home vegetables sometimes." I hesitated. Social interaction with a purpose felt like a demand. "I'm not much of a gardener," I said. My floral design was about arrangement, aesthetics, not the dirty work of cultivation. Neither are most of us. That's why it's a community effort. We learn. Will you come? 9 o'clock. I'll bring extra gloves. The expectation was clear, but gentle. All right, I said. I'll be there. The Elm Street Community Garden was a large, fenced plot in a neighborhood slightly more diverse than where Robert and I had lived. Raised beds and sprawling rows were marked with hand-painted signs. Tomatoes, please share. Lettuce, take some. A small tool shed stood in one corner. About 10 people were already there when I arrived, men and women of various ages, wearing old clothes and hats. Miriam waved from near a compost bin. She handed me a pair of worn leather gloves. Welcome to the Anti-Contemplation Society. Your assignment is that row of beans. The weeds are the ones without the heart-shaped leaves. Any questions? I shook my head and went to the assigned row. The work was simple, repetitive. Kneel, identify, grasp at the base, pull, shake soil from roots, toss into a bucket. The morning sun was warm on my back. The sounds were of rustling leaves, distant traffic, and the low chatter of other volunteers. No one spoke to me directly for the first hour. It was a relief. During a water break, a woman in her 50s with salt and pepper braids sat on a bench near me. She wore overalls and a wide-brimmed hat. She sipped from a canteen and nodded at my row. You're doing a good job. Those bindweed roots are stubborn. You have to get the whole thing or they come back twice as strong. I looked at the tangled white root in my gloved hand. Like a bad memory, I said, then immediately regretted it. It was too revealing. The woman didn't miss a beat. She gave a slow, knowing nod. Exactly like that, you have to dig deep and get it all out. She extended her hand. I'm Sophia. Evelyn. I shook her hand, my glove dusty. New to the garden? I haven't seen you before. It's my first time. Miriam invited me. Ah, Miriam, she's our resident recruiter. She finds people who need the soil more than the soil needs them. Sophia took another drink. What brings you to the neighborhood? It's not the usual transplant spot. I gave my rehearsed, neutral answer. I recently moved, needed a change of scenery. She looked at me, her eyes thoughtful but not intrusive. Scenery's overrated. It's the people that make a place, or break it. She stood up, stretching her back. Well, Evelyn, the bindweed awaits. Nice to meet you. The following Saturday I returned. Sophia was there again. We worked on adjacent rows, pulling weeds in companionable silence for a while. So, a change of scenery, she said after some time, not looking up from the ground. That usually means a man. I paused, my trowel hovering over a weed. I said nothing. Sorry, she said, glancing over. None of my business, it's just, I recognized the look, the careful way of moving, like the air might crack. I had that look for a year after I left my husband. The admission was offered casually, a statement of fact rather than a demand for reciprocity. It hung in the air between us. I could ignore it, or I could acknowledge it. Yes, I said finally, the word quiet. It was a man. She nodded, as if I'd confirmed a minor detail. They can really mess with your head, can't they? Make you doubt what's right in front of your face. He did that, I said. The words came easier here, with our hands in the dirt, not facing each other. He told me no one would believe me. Sophia sat back on her heels, wiping her forehead with her arm. She looked at me directly. Did you believe you? I started to. I recorded him, to prove it to myself. A slow smile spread across her face. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. You did? Well, I'll be damned. Good for you. What did he do when you showed him? He panicked. Then he got served with divorce papers. Her smile widened. Even better. You're not just getting out. You're leaving tracks. That's how it should be. She went back to weeding. My guy just drank and yelled. No finesse. Yours sounds like the fancy kind of awful, the kind that makes you think you're the crazy one. He was very convincing, I said. They always are, until they're not. She tossed a clump of weeds into the bucket. "You're in the right place, Evelyn. This dirt doesn't lie. The seeds you plant grow. The weeds you pull stay pulled. It's straightforward. You could use some straightforward." We finished the row. As we were packing up tools, Sophia said, "A few of us go for tea at the place on the corner after this. Nothing fancy. You should come." I thought of my empty apartment, the legal files waiting. I should get back. "Suit yourself. The offer stands. Next week, maybe." She didn't push. "Next week, maybe," I echoed. I drove home, the car smelling of earth and green leaves. I had a bag of lettuce and some early radishes in the passenger seat. My knees were stained with dirt, and my muscles ached in a clean, honest way. I had not just been weeding a garden. I had, without fanfare, planted a seed of my own. I had spoken a fragment of my truth to someone who understood its shape without needing the entire blueprint. It was not a legal affidavit. It was a simpler, human testimony exchanged over a row of beans. That night, I washed the lettuce and made a salad. It tasted different. I couldn't explain why. Later, I texted Miriam. "Thank you for the garden. I met Sophia." Her reply came quickly. "She's good people. I'm glad you went." I realized then that Miriam hadn't just given me a task. She had given me a context, a place where my history was not a unique tragedy, but a shared, understood experience. It was a different kind of evidence. It was corroboration. The radishes from the garden were sharp and clean on my tongue. I ate them sliced thin on toast with butter, a simple meal at my new table. The legal process was a separate world, running parallel to my Saturdays in the dirt. Diane called on a Tuesday afternoon. "Evelyn, we need to discuss strategy. Can you come to the office tomorrow morning? Robert's attorney, Branson, has responded to our settlement proposal. It's time to talk leverage." "I'll be there," I said. The next morning, Diane's office smelled of coffee and lemon wood polish. She had 2 files open on her desk. "Branson's counteroffer is predictably insulting," she began, pushing a single sheet of paper toward me. It outlined a lump sum significantly lower than what we'd requested, no spousal support beyond 6 months, and a clause demanding I destroy all recordings and sign a non-disparagement agreement. I read it once, then set it down. He wants to buy my silence and my evidence. Precisely. It's a confession of fear. They are terrified of those recordings becoming public. That fear is our asset. Diane leaned forward. "Here is my recommendation. We decline this offer. We state that we are prepared to proceed to a court hearing where we will motion to enter the audio recordings into evidence. Given the content, a judge would likely allow it. The existence of the motion itself and the specific excerpts we would cite would become a matter of public record." I understood. It wasn't about playing the tapes in a crowded courtroom necessarily. It was about the threat of the legal process exposing their existence. Robert's reputation could not survive even that. "What do we want instead?" I asked. "The original terms. A 60-40 split of liquid assets in your favor, the full value of your separate business account acknowledged as yours, 3 years of spousal support, and his payment of all your legal fees. In return, you agree to keep the recordings confidential, to be used only in any future legal proceedings should he violate the agreement. No broad non-disparagement clause. You retain the right to speak your truth." It was a strong position. Will he agree? His lawyer will advise him to. Branson is a bulldog, but he's not stupid. I've dealt with him before. He'll bluster, but when faced with concrete, damning evidence, he folds to protect his client from themselves. We just have to demonstrate we're serious. She tapped the file. "I've prepared a draft of the motion to admit the recordings. I've included transcribed excerpts from 3 files. The 'no one would believe you' exchange is one of them. I want your permission to send this draft to Branson, not to file it, but to show him what we have ready to go." The strategy was clear, a show of force. "You have my permission." "Good." Diane made a note. "The other matter is mediation. The court has scheduled a session for 2 weeks from Friday. It's mandatory before a trial date is set. That will be the real arena. Branson and Robert will be in the room. I will be there with you. Our goal is to secure the settlement we just discussed, signed that day. What should I expect? Robert will likely try to perform. He'll be the wounded, reasonable husband. Branson will attack the validity of the recordings and your character. My job is to keep us focused on the evidence and the legal consequences of not settling. Your job is to say nothing unless I prompt you. Your presence is a statement. Your calm will be a weapon. I nodded. The instructions were tactical, like stage directions. I could follow them. One more thing, Diane said, her tone shifting slightly. Have you considered what you want to do after? Professionally? My floral design. I've been taking small commissions from my apartment. I'd like to formalize it. The settlement should provide capital for that. It's a good plan. Having a next step is important. She closed the file. I'll send the draft to Branson today. Expect some noise, then silence, then, I believe, capitulation. I left her office. The city moved around me, indifferent. The leverage was no longer a hidden device in my pocket. It was a drafted legal motion, a tactical plan. It felt more powerful this way, translated into the language of the system he respected. The noise came the following day. Diane forwarded an email from Branson. Its subject line was, "Unacceptable." The body was a tirade about ambush tactics and unconscionable intimidation. He demanded we retract the motion draft and return to good faith negotiation. Diane's response, which she copied me on, was 3 sentences. The motion is factually and legally supported. We are prepared to file it should mediation fail. We await your client's revised settlement proposal. The silence after that lasted 8 days. Then a new email arrived. Diane called me. They've sent a new proposal. It's not perfect, but it's a 75% improvement. They've agreed to the asset split. They've agreed to 3 years of support, though at a slightly lower monthly number. They will pay 70% of your fees. They no longer demand destruction of the recordings, only confidentiality outside of legal channels. And the non-disparagement clause is now mutual and narrow. It was a near-total victory. What's your advice? We counter on the support number and the fee percentage. Hold firm on one, concede slightly on the other. This is the final stretch. They want this to go away, so do we. The mediation will be a formality to sign the final agreement. Do it, I said. I hung up the phone and looked around my apartment. The bookshelf was now full of books. The fern was thriving. A small bouquet of zinnias from the community garden sat in a jar on the table. The leverage had been theoretical, then it was a recording, then a legal file. Now it was a set of numbers on a page that would secure my future. The process was cold, procedural, and profoundly effective. The man who had controlled every narrative had been outmaneuvered not by a shout, but by a strategy. I picked up the zinnias, trimmed the stems, and placed them back in the water. The routine was mine. The next move was mine. The silence from the other side was not a threat. It was a surrender. The mediation was held in a conference room at the Family Court Services building. The room was small, windowless, with a bland beige carpet and a laminate table that shone under fluorescent lights. Diane and I arrived first. She placed her briefcase on the table, opened it, and laid out 3 copies of the final settlement agreement. She also set down a portable speaker, small and black. "Remember," she said quietly, "let them talk. I'll handle the exchanges. Your only task is to remain composed." I nodded. I was wearing a gray pantsuit, my hair pulled back. I looked professional, unimpeachable. I felt a steady, low hum of focus, like before arranging a complex floral piece for a critical client. The door opened. Robert entered with his attorney, Branson. Branson was a man in his 60s with a combative posture and a sharp suit. Robert looked thinner. He wore his own suit, but it seemed to hang on him slightly. He avoided looking at me directly, taking the seat across the table with a studied, weary dignity. He was playing the part of the beleaguered, reasonable man forced into this unpleasantness. The mediator, a tired-looking woman named Carol, introduced herself and read the standard script about the purpose of mediation and confidentiality. Branson spoke first. "My client has come today in good faith, hoping to resolve this matter amicably and avoid further unnecessary damage to both parties. We believe the latest proposal from Ms. Shaw's office, while still excessive, forms a basis for discussion. However, we must again object in the strongest terms to the continued threat of introducing unverified, illegally obtained recordings into any forum." Diane's voice was calm. "The recordings are verified and admissible, as previously established. Their existence is not a threat, Mr. Branson. They are a fact that informs my client's position and her understanding of the marriage's dissolution. We are here to finalize an agreement based on that reality." Robert shifted in his seat. He finally looked at me, his expression one of pained confusion. "Eve, do we really need all this? The lawyers, the accusations? Can't we just talk? This is so cold." It was a direct appeal, designed to bypass Diane and trigger my old programming, to smooth things over, to make peace. I met his gaze and said nothing. I simply waited. Diane answered for me. "Mr. Carter, all necessary discussions have occurred through counsel. Today is about the agreement. Shall we review the terms?" Branson leaned forward. "The terms regarding asset division are workable. The spousal support duration is excessive. My client is willing to agree to 18 months. As for legal fees, each party should bear their own. This litigation has been driven by your client's actions, after all." "The litigation was necessitated by your client's conduct," Diane corrected. "The support duration is 3 years, non-negotiable. The fee provision stands. These are not points of discussion. They are the conditions for settlement." Robert's mask of weary reason began to crack at the edges. A flush crept up his neck. "This is extortion, Diane. You know it is. Using private, distorted snippets of conversation to bludgeon me into financial submission." "The conversations are not distorted," Diane said. She placed her hand lightly on the portable speaker. "In fact, to ensure we are all operating from the same factual understanding, I think it would be useful to clarify the nature of these snippets." "With the mediator's permission?" Carol, the mediator, looked uneasy, but nodded. "If it will help move things forward." Branson held up a hand. "This is highly irregular and inflammatory." "It is evidentiary," Diane said. She pressed a button on the speaker. The room filled with the sound of Robert's voice, clear and unmistakable. It was from the apartment confrontation, the recording from the camera. "You think you've won something. You're in a bare apartment with nothing. I built the life we have. My money, my reputation, my work. You'll be left with nothing. I'll fight you for every penny. I'll drag this out for years. You don't have the stomach for a fight, Evelyn. You never did." Diane stopped the playback. The silence that followed was absolute and heavy. Robert had gone completely still, his face ashen. He stared at the small black speaker as if it had spit venom. All performance drained away. The wounded husband, the reasonable negotiator, those characters vanished. What remained was raw, exposed panic. His eyes darted to Branson, whose own expression had tightened into grim comprehension. Branson had heard the threats, the contempt, the outright declaration of a protracted war. He now understood the full weight of what Diane could bring before a judge. Robert's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not anger or manipulation, but pure, undiluted fear. The fear of being known. The fear of that voice, his own, being the final arbiter of his character. Diane broke the silence, her voice quiet but filling the room. "That is one of 94 files. We have selected 3 for potential admission. This one demonstrates intent to inflict financial and emotional hardship. A judge would find it highly relevant. Now, Mr. Branson, shall we discuss the 3 years of support, or would you prefer we adjourn and proceed to a hearing on the motion to admit? Branson cleared his throat. He did not look at his client. He looked defeated. There is no need for that. My client wishes to resolve this today. He turned to Robert. Robert, the agreement as it stands is the best possible outcome under the circumstances. I advise you to sign it. Robert was still staring at the table. His shoulders slumped, a physical collapse of resistance. The facade was not just cracked, it was obliterated. He gave a single jerky nod. My client agrees, Branson said, his voice flat. The rest was administrative. Carol guided us through each page of the settlement agreement. Robert signed where indicated, his signature a shaky scrawl. I signed with my steady, familiar hand. Diane and Branson signed as witnesses. Copies were made. It took 20 minutes. No one spoke except Carol and the attorneys confirming page numbers. When it was done, Diane placed 1 copy in her briefcase. She stood. We're finished here. Robert finally spoke, his voice a hoarse whisper directed at the table. I'm sorry, Eve. I looked at him. I felt nothing. No triumph. No pity. It was an observation. The agreement includes a clause for communication regarding the transfer of assets through counsel only, I said. Please direct any further communication to Diane. I followed Diane out of the room. The hallway was bright and quiet. We walked to the elevator. It's done, Diane said. He won't contest it. The recordings will remain confidential, but they serve their purpose. You have what you need. We stepped into the elevator. The doors closed on the sterile, silent floor where my marriage was legally terminated. The victory was not in his apology. It was in the signature on the page. It was in the silence he offered now, a silence of surrender, not control. The leverage had been converted into a binding document. The process was complete. The courthouse doors swung shut behind us, sealing the sterile air of the mediation room inside. On the sidewalk, the city noise was a welcome assault. Diane paused, adjusting her briefcase strap. The financial transfers will begin within 30 days. My office will handle the coordination. You should start looking for a proper studio space or prepare your spare room. It's time to build. I will, I said. We shook hands, a firm, final grip. She walked toward the parking garage, and I turned in the opposite direction. I did not go straight home. I walked for 20 blocks, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the pavement. The signed agreement was in my portfolio, but its weight was elsewhere, in the space where anxiety had lived for months. That space felt hollow now, clean. I passed a storefront with a "For Rent" sign in the window. It was too large, too expensive. I noted the realtor's number anyway. The next morning, I began the practical work of transition. Using the temporary support funds now guaranteed by the agreement, I hired a small, reputable moving company. I scheduled them for the coming Saturday. Then I called Miriam. The mediation is done. It's settled. I'm moving my things from storage this Saturday. Her response was immediate. What time? I'll be there. And I'll call Sophia. Many hands make light work, and we have many opinions on where a sofa should go. On Saturday morning, a moving truck arrived at my storage unit. I supervised as 2 men loaded the few pieces of furniture I wanted. My grandmother's writing desk, a comfortable armchair, my professional work table and tools. Boxes of books, kitchenware, and personal items followed. Everything else, the jointly selected furniture, the decorative pieces that had been more about display than comfort, I had sold or donated. At the apartment, Miriam and Sophia were already waiting, wearing casual clothes. Sophia had brought a toolkit. Miriam carried a basket containing coffee, pastries, and a new houseplant, a robust peace lily. For the corner that needs life, she said, handing it to me. The movers brought everything up. Under Sophia's direction, the desk went near the window in the living room. The armchair found a spot in a patch of sunlight. The work table and storage shelves for my floral supplies were carried into the second bedroom. This was the crucial space. Once the movers left, we began unpacking boxes. Sophia took charge of the kitchen, her methodical nature suited to arranging pots and dishes. Miriam started on the books, sorting them not by author but by what she called mood and necessity. I worked in the spare room. I assembled the wire racks for my cooler where I would store fresh flowers. I laid out my tools, clippers, knives, floral tape, wires, vases of various heights and shapes. I unpacked boxes of ribbon and fabric. I set up a small desk for my laptop and accounting ledgers. The room was small, but it was mine. It had a door I could close. It had a purpose I had defined. Sophia appeared in the doorway holding 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to me and surveyed the room. "This is good. This is a workshop, a place where you make things. It has a better feeling than a living room ever could." "It feels possible," I said. "It is possible. It's already happening." She leaned against the doorframe. "You know, when I left my husband, I didn't have a plan. I had a cousin's couch and a lot of rage. It took me 2 years to get a room of my own. You're starting with 1. That's smart." "The evidence was the plan," I said. "The evidence was the shovel. This," she said, gesturing to the room, "is the garden." We broke for lunch, eating sandwiches Miriam had brought at my new dining table. The conversation was easy, revolving around the garden's tomato yield and a new bakery that had opened nearby. No one asked about Robert. No one needed to. His part in this story was legally concluded. In the afternoon, Miriam helped me hang curtains. Sophia mounted a large, empty pinboard on the wall of my studio. "For inspiration," she said, "or invoices, whichever comes first." By evening, the apartment was functional. Books filled the shelves. The kitchen was stocked. My studio was ready for its first commission. The peace lily sat in its chosen corner, leaves broad and green. Miriam and Sophia prepared to leave. At the door, Miriam hugged me, a quick, firm embrace. "This is a good home, Evelyn. It already feels like you." Sophia gave a nod of approval. "We're at the garden next Saturday. Don't be late. The zucchini is getting aggressive." I closed the door after them. The silence returned, but it was a different quality of quiet than the hotels or the first empty weeks here. It was a quiet populated by the echoes of friends, by the solid presence of my belongings in their places. I walked through each room, turning off lights. I saved the studio for last. I stood in the center of the small room. The work table was clean, the tools aligned. The empty pinboard was a white square on the wall, a field of potential. I had a client consultation on Tuesday for a small wedding. I had a business bank account funded by the initial settlement transfer. I had a signed decree that granted me freedom and the resources to use it. I turned off the light and closed the door. In the living room, I sat in my armchair. The streetlights cast a soft glow through the new curtains. The revenge was complete, but I understood now that the victory was not in the settlement or the silenced apology. The victory was in this chair, in this room, in the quiet certainty of tomorrow's work. It was a victory of construction, not destruction. I sat there until the sky outside turned black, not thinking, just being present in the space I had built. The stems of white hydrangea yielded with a clean snap under my shears. I arranged them in a low glass bowl, adding clusters of deep blue delphinium for contrast. Morning light streamed into my studio, illuminating particles of dust dancing in the air. Not as a metaphor, but as a simple fact of a sunlit room where real work was done. The wedding centerpiece was my 3rd commission this month. My business ledger showed a steady, increasing balance. It was not extravagant, but it was mine. My phone buzzed on the work table. I wiped my hands on a towel before picking it up. The notification was a text message from a number not saved in my contacts, but I recognized the area code. It was from Elaine, a woman Robert and I had socialized with occasionally, the wife of one of his former colleagues. We had never been close. I had not spoken to her since before I left. I opened the message. Evelyn, it's Elaine Harris. I heard through the grapevine that everything is finalized. I just wanted to say, I always believed you. I'm so glad you're free. He had a way of talking about you that never sat right with me. I should have said something. Wishing you all the best. I read the message twice. The words, I always believed you, were a plain statement. They did not spark joy or vindication in a dramatic sense. They settled into a quiet space of confirmation. She had seen what I had lived. Others might have too. Robert's performance had not been flawless. The world was not uniformly skeptical. The truth had been visible to those who chose to look. I did not feel the need to craft a lengthy response. I typed, "Thank you, Elaine. I appreciate that. I'm doing well." I sent it, then placed the phone back on the table, screen down. I returned to the hydrangeas, adjusting the angle of a stem. The studio was cool and smelled of green stems and damp floral foam. On the pinboard Sophia had mounted, I had tacked a few things. A color palette for an upcoming event, a business card from a boutique that wanted to carry my dried arrangements, and a photograph. The photograph was taken 3 weeks ago at the community garden. Miriam, Sophia, and I stood between rows of towering sunflowers, squinting in the sun. Miriam had her arm linked through mine. Sophia was holding up a gigantic zucchini like a trophy. Our clothes were dirty. Our smiles were easy. It was not a posed or perfect picture. It was a record of a Saturday. I finished the centerpiece, misted it with water, and placed it in the cooler. I had 2 more to complete by noon. The work was methodical and satisfying. Each arrangement was a problem to be solved. Balance, color, texture, form. The solutions were silent and visual. There was no argument, no second-guessing, no narrative to manage. Later, after delivering the arrangements to the wedding planner, I stopped at the Sunrise Cafe. Miriam was in her usual chair, reading a thick biography. She marked her page with a finger as I approached. "The garden needs you tomorrow," she said without preamble. "The autumn kale is ready for harvesting, and Sophia insists you learn how to properly blanch and freeze it. She says it's a life skill." "I'll be there," I said. I ordered a tea and sat with her for a while. We did not speak much. The silence was comfortable, filled with the ambient sounds of the cafe. That evening, in my apartment, I reviewed my accounts. The final spousal support payment had been deposited. The division of assets was complete. The legal matters were closed. Diane Shaw's final invoice had been paid. The digital archive of recordings still existed, encrypted and stored. I had not listened to them since the mediation. They were now an artifact, a closed case file. Their purpose had been served. I made a simple dinner. I ate at my table, looking out at the lights of other apartments. I thought about the phrase Robert had used, the one that had started it all. "No one would believe you anyway." It was a sentence designed to isolate, to make the external world a wall of doubt. It had taken me months to realize the sentence had a flaw. It depended on my agreement. It required me to disbelieve myself first. The recording device was not what broke the spell. It was my decision to use it. The lawyer was not my savior. She was a technician for a system I had chosen to engage. The friends were not rescuers. They were people I had allowed myself to meet. The belief started as a private, stubborn spark. I fed it with evidence. I protected it with action. I built a life where it could grow into a quiet certainty. The victory was not in his defeat, though that was necessary. It was in the absence of his voice in my daily thoughts. It was in the ability to hear a text message like Elaine's and feel a mild, distant gratitude, not a seismic shift. It was in the physical reality of my studio, my ledger, my soil-stained gardening gloves hanging by the door. I washed my dishes and put them away. I checked the lock on my door, a habitual action now devoid of fear. In my studio, I turned on the light for a moment, surveying the neat shelves, the tools, the photograph on the pinboard. I had believed myself, and in doing so, I had built a world where that belief was reflected back to me, not by everyone, but by everyone who mattered. The circle was complete, and it was quiet. I turned off the light and went to bed.